Welcome back. This is Zach Winters. This is the Winter Brothers Horror Show. Actually, this is the Winter Brothers True Crime. This is our first story, and this is going to bring us to a small town called Noble, Illinois. Small town, less than 800 people in the southeast section of Illinois. And this is the year's 1998. The year that beepers reigned, cell phones were not the norm, MTV still played music, and Marilyn Manson was at the height of his career. All right, this is pre-Columbine, and some of the most edgy teens have ever come out of this world were in this setting. Our subject is Christopher Churchill. He was known locally as a troublemaker, an oddball, and a weirdo. He dressed all in black, and of course he had the moniker of the Marilyn Manson shirt. That's what he was known for. A lot of locals, especially kids that went to school with him, reported trying to isolate from him as he would lash out. We're talking hitting, punching, yelling, and just generally what we would normally call edgy behavior today. If it stayed at that, we wouldn't even be talking about it. So before we get into the real subject, our story actually starts in 1997. He was in his early to mid-teens, around 16 years old. And he was actually tossed out of his normal high school, the one that he basically terrorized. Okay? And he was put into a school for behavior modification. Kids that were just generally bad and too hard to handle in a normal setting. All right, so he goes to this normal school, and within 30 days, he actually drops out. But not before after he gets arrested for throwing a rock at his girlfriend's mother's face. So he assaults his girlfriend's mother. He drops out of this behavior modification, and this is actually where things started to snowball. Enter his half-brother, Jonathan. All right, so his half-brother, Jonathan, decided to move up from Texas to Noble, Illinois, and moved in with Chris and his mother, Susan. All right, so it's the three of them. Susan's mother actually hoped that Jonathan's more mature nature, even though he was only a year older, at 17, figured that the mature nature of his older brother may have a soothing effect on Christopher. Unfortunately, that was not to happen. Okay, so that is actually the backdrop of our story, and we're going to get into it. But before we do, just note that this can be a very tough story. It involves assault and children, and even for someone like me that was a true crime, reader and watcher, it was a little tough to hear. So if this is something that's not for you, take this moment now to, dip out. Maybe the next story will be for you. Okay. Also, please like and subscribe for our videos so that way you can see the future videos. We do a mix of horror, short stories, some true crime. This is, like I said, our first one. We hope to do more. We're also only hoping to bring stuff that you haven't seen before. We're not going to be doing the Charlie Mansons and the Ted Bundys that everyone carries, covers to death. We want to bring stuff that you haven't seen before. Or if we do cover something that's been maybe seen a little bit more, we want to bring an edge or a view to it that you maybe not have thought of. All right, so if that's something that interests you, definitely subscribe now. And if you have any cases or stories that you want us to cover, please, put it in the comment section. We definitely check the comments regularly. And, we just want to thank you for watching. All right, so without further ado, here's our story.
It's in October of that same year that our story really starts to take off. Enter Debra Smith. This is a woman in her early 30s. She's recently separated, and she's the mother of 3 small children. She moves into Noble, Illinois. In fact, she starts working at a VCR packaging plant, the same plant that Christopher and Jonathan's mother worked at. They soon became friends. During the separation from her husband, she moved in with Susan. So Susan has a big heart. She moves Debra in with their 3 children. And all sources state that there was an immediate attraction between Jonathan and Debra. It was obvious to everyone. And despite their age difference being 17 and a woman in her 30s, the two were very much in love. All right, so that part is not disputed. There will be a lot of people later that will point to that as being inappropriate, but for our purpose on this story, we're not gonna get into that. They were so much in love. Shortly after meeting, that they decided to take their relationship to the next level, and they moved into 448 North Noble Avenue. And so, after a few months of living together and dating, Jonathan decided he wanted to take it to the next level. All right, so on February 8th, 1998, Jonathan would propose to Debra, and she would, of course, say yes. All right, even though they were not, she was not truly divorced yet, there was this sentiment that they knew they wanted to be together, and that as soon as that divorce was finalized, he wanted to marry her, and she agreed. So it was just on this truly happy day that Jonathan would take the family shopping. They bought a bike for the 10-year-old Corey. When they returned home, they found Christopher sitting on the steps of the home. Now, this was not uncommon. He was always welcome, and he would come in and stay the night, eat dinner, and that's what they did. On this very joyous night, he was on the steps. They welcomed him in, and they had a dinner. And unlike many times before, what happened this night was nothing like the family had ever seen before or after. Christopher would later recount to the homicide detectives during his interrogation that his half-brother Jonathan and now fiancée Debra stayed up drinking and playing cards, which Christopher kept losing, and losing badly. So his stepbrother would tease him about it, and as brothers often do, this was par for the course. So it was just some, ribbing and elbowing, ball busting. Not a big deal. And Debra Smith, the fiancée, would join in on occasion as well. So, while we all have this retelling, it's easy to imagine that this run-of-the-mill joking around people do when they're close with someone, it really got to Chris. He would later talk about how he was seething with anger. So after the games were done, Deborah's 3 youngest children, who all lived with the pair, would go to sleep. So this is 12-year-old Jennifer, 10-year-old Corey, and 6-year-old Kenneth. Now they're all sleeping. And it was at this point, eventually, the game would come to an end, and everyone would retire to their beds for the evening, but not Chris. Chris, with seething from what he felt was disrespect, stayed up and continued to drink into the early morning, which is always a great idea, drunk in anger. The cops would record Christopher revealing how he fantasized killing his brother for over the year. All right, so this whole time, he couldn't handle the emotions, of having to share his mother's love and the feeling that everyone liked his brother more than him because he was more normal. All right, so even saying that he wanted to use his body, and I quote, like a guinea pig for his anger. So it just kind of gives you an idea of how sick Chris was. This time on Friday, the 8th, drunk and seething, he didn't hold back. He went through the house, rummaging for a weapon. He found kitchen knives, he found all types of stuff, but he finally settled on a hammer that he knew was stashed under the sink. All right? And the way it went down is just absolutely sickening. So this is just warning number 2. Next, 12-year-old Jennifer's alarm goes off at 6 a.m., as it did every day on Monday through Friday for school. All right, so Jennifer would normally wake up, cross the hall, and go and wake up her mother, Debra. But in this morning, Christopher, lying in wait, ambushed her in the hall before she could. Jennifer was not killed at this point. He knocked her out. So she laid unconscious on the floor. Obviously the weapon of choice was the hammer. He did not use overkill at this point. He just knocked her out. And then he made his way to Jonathan and Deborah's room and proceeded to attack them both as they laid sleeping. All right, he knew that he had to get his brother before, because he would obviously be able to fight him off if he was awake and cautious. So, sadly, they were both attacked in their sleep. At that point, he made his way back to the younger children's room, and at this point, that's when he attacked them. All right, he did kill the 2 children when they were sleeping, and then he made his way back to Jennifer. And he assaulted them. All right, and after he was done assaulting the 12-year-old Jennifer, he made his way back into Jonathan and Deborah's room, and he assaulted Debra, who was at this point deceased, which is, pretty depraved if you ask me. Obviously, I think you guys realize what I mean by assault. YouTube doesn't really like the other word, but it's a really sad and depraved thing. Later, when he was asked about it, he said he, quote unquote, wanted to do something sick. When he was done assaulting Debra, he did rummage through all their pockets, and he found that his brother had recently just got paid in cash and had about $900 in cash, and he took it. For several days after the massacre, Christopher would come and go as he pleased. So while the family laid where he left them, exactly where he left them, he would eat, sleep, watch TV, just run about his normal day. All right. The neighbors would later recount that nobody came or went from that house besides Chris. To make matters worse is the fact that they were so new to the house and it was such a small town, there wasn't many people looking for them. So evidently at this point, Debra had lost her job. Work wasn't looking for her. And, it was just a, tragic situation where they laid there for a week and nobody was looking for them. I just don't know how that happens, but there's not a lot of reporting. But from what I can gather, they just sat there and nobody was checking for them. So now, flush with cash, the 16-year-old Christopher would splurge on DVDs and other luxury items of the day, buying CDs and clothes. It was so puzzling to his friends. They couldn't understand how Chris had this newfound wealth. And when they eventually, asked him where he got the money from, in a shocking admission, he told the truth. The friends were obviously a little perplexed and thought that he was joking. He was always a little dark, dressing in black, had a sick sense of humor, so they didn't believe him. Later that day, though, the friend's conscience got the better of him, and he would call the cops and tell them the horrific story. He's just assuming that, at this point that maybe it is the truth. Maybe this family is horrifically laying dead on the floor, and he couldn't live with himself if he didn't say something. So he did call. And minus the one lurid detail Christopher only later revealed while being interrogated. It seems that he told the detectives he wanted to do something really bad, and he decided that Jonathan and Deborah's indiscretion of teasing him would not only murder them, he would also sexually assault the 12-year-old Jennifer as she lay dying. So the act was so egregious that during his trial, the prosecutors played the confession video, and he had to look away and cover his ears because, he couldn't handle his own details. So, in his own words, he committed this due to pent-up stress and rage. Now, while Christopher actually, at first, like most of these, idiots do, especially, younger kids, so maybe I shouldn't say idiots, but, regardless how most of these guys do, he admitted to his crimes in the interrogation. But when it came to trial, he pled not guilty. During the trial, despite Christopher's explicit confession, his lawyers tried an interesting defense. They stated that Christopher, in some misplaced altruism, was covering for the real killer. In the same way that O.J. Simpson is still looking for the real killer of his wife, his ex-wife. However, they found blood on his soaked Marilyn Manson shirt, and luckily DNA was becoming a regular thing around this time. The blood found to be Debra Smith, which is said to have sealed his fate. And if it weren't for the early DNA of the day, the trial may have gone a different way, who knows? But they took the Marilyn Manson shirt that he was wearing that had blood, and that's how they were able to pin him with DNA. So it was not only his confession to his friend, this was an early case of DNA. Remember, the DNA was used in the OJ trial, and this was not shortly after, only a year later. So this was one of the early cases of that. That Marilyn Manson shirt soaked in blood definitely did him in. In the aftermath, there was much made about how Christopher was bullied, and that this may have contributed to what eventually happened. There even seems to be a camp of people who have excused what he did. Saying that he somehow justified that, because he was quote unquote bullied, that this happened. In my case, I just don't see it. This family invited him in. They had dinner with him. They, fed him. They had a fun game of cards, and evidently they often did this. They seemed to be nothing but nice and inviting and gave him a place to stay, and his sick mind just couldn't handle his jealousy or, whatever it was, saying that they, picked on him. I just don't see it. There's also some that want to focus on the fact that Jonathan was 17 and dating, a woman in her 30s. And, these may be talking points worth discussing in some other context, but in this one, what does it matter? This was two people that were obviously in love and they lived together. Whether it's unconscionable or not, he was of legal age. He was 17 years old, Jonathan and Debra. So, yeah, there's a big age gap. What does that have to do with someone that murdered them and these 3 children? So just time and place. I mean, you can put it in the comment section if you disagree, but I honestly just don't see it. So when I say that some feel like, he shouldn't be in prison, some even feel like for instance, his uncle, which I'm going to show you this clip in a second, feel that someone else may have helped him, which plays into his, the real killer is really out there. But, check out this clip.
Thomas Graves is Churchill's uncle. He paints a much different picture of his nephew than the one some of you may remember from 1998. The one in handcuffs, accused of bludgeoning 5 people to death with a hammer.
He was a very good kid. He was a kind of a quiet kid. Mm-hmm. He kept to himself. It was very seldom he talked to him.
Thomas believes today what he believed 18 years ago, that someone else is involved in those murders. Thomas never proclaimed Churchill's innocence, just that his nephew could not have committed those murders by himself.
He was too thin. He was a 16-year-old, 68-pound kid that killed a 300-pound woman and another 200-pound guy with 3 kids, and he done it by himself. There's no way.
Thomas believes there could have been 2 accomplices, and he heard state police may have possibly found a diary detailing these brutal murders, but nothing has come of it. This brings us back to today. Thomas originally hoped Christopher would get a new trial and perhaps some details of what happened in Noble in 1998 could emerge. These hearings only deal with resentencing, however. Thomas knows a best-case scenario would be that the judge would allow Christopher a chance at parole. Despite the stigma that comes with being related to a convicted killer, Thomas continues to support Christopher.
It's very tough, and I don't like seeing him like this. But what can I do? There's nothing I really can do, except for sit there and watch and see how he does. It just tears me up, and I just can't stand it.
So it's a really tough story, and it's been much made about Christopher was bullied, and that's what made him do what he did. I think it's important that we actually don't give him an ounce of sympathy. It's really a tragedy, and I think that's pretty obvious for the vast majority of people that would watch this video, that he doesn't deserve any sympathy and not an inch of leeway, not an inch. But there are a small group of people out there that do support him, feel that maybe he deserves another chance, like that video that played before of his uncle. And then there's not even relatives, This took place before Columbine, so that we also saw that happen with the Columbine killers, where they have their own fan group, which is also disgusting. But this story also opened up something in Illinois with the Supreme Court, because he was a minor and he was sentenced to life plus 50 years. All right, so essentially no chance of parole ever. They deemed that unconstitutional, and his case came up, and this gave the remaining family of the kids and Debra and Jonathan a sense that their justice that they had felt previously was going to be ripped away. You can find a Facebook page where Debra's old ex-husband is petitioning to keep Christopher Churchill in jail where he belongs. And it seems that is going to be the case, but the fact that it even came up, that it would be unconstitutional, to me that's crazy. And it's really just a sad story, and hopefully he stays where he belongs. Again, thank you for watching our channel. We hope to bring you some more. Make sure to like, subscribe, and if you have anyone that you know that may like these type of videos, please pass them along. It helps us more than you would ever know. And we'll continue to bring these cases to you as long as you continue to keep watching. All right, thanks again, and stay blessed. Yeah, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you here again. Bye-bye.